Okay.
Welcome everybody to our session about SCVMM. My name is Michael Riffley. If you don't know me already, we have a picture which is not very recently taken, but I'd like to introduce MVP Thomas Maurer, which was so kind to do a session with me together about SCVMM, and we'd like to show you some cool things. Maybe you introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, my name is Thomas Maurer. I'm an MVP since last year for Hyper-V, not actually for Virtual Machine Manager System Center, but those two things are working together, and so you have to know them both. In the session description, we said we are going to talk about hypervisor management with SCVMM for all the different hypervisors, but we also did include some really special things you can do with Virtual Machine Manager as well. So we will cover some of the features from Virtual Machine Manager as well.
Okay, that's the agenda so far. You can see we have a lot more content than has been announced, as Thomas already said. Let's start over. Why we should use SCVMM? I would say the most important reason is if you have a large Hyper-V environment with more than 2 hosts, more than 5 hosts maybe, it's a must. So it's like a center management platform. Like, you know, back in the days I've done a lot with vCenter. It's the same here. So you have a center management platform to orchestrate, let's say, operate a lot of Hyper-V hosts and machines. On top of that, you will see Thomas will show you some services stuff, which is really cool. If you like templates, if you like or have to deal with templates, you have to use SCVMM. Hyper-V does not provide you template management without System Center. Bare metal deployment, by the way, is a cool feature which we will show you, or Thomas will show in a live demo. What's that exactly? We will see it in a few minutes.
Yeah, basically, important part here, we have shown some connections and some of the environment we have for Virtual Machine Manager. You have to think about Virtual Machine Manager as kind of your centralized data center management tool. It's not like the name says, virtual machine management. It's also fabric management. It's also manage your storage. You can manage your network. It does basically everything you have to know for your virtual environment. Yeah. And this is a slide which also shows the connections to the other System Center products, as well as other software things like WSAS. You need to patch your environment, and Windows Deployment Service as well. And from your side, you have also some of the VMware and Xen stuff in there, right?
Yes. If I did not mention it already, I have been converted. So I was a VMware guy I would say, until a year ago. I did some Hyper-V stuff too, but then we made a strategic decision in our company and we threw out VMware. So that's the case. I'm not saying that VMware is shit, absolutely not. It's still a cool product, but this is also cool. You will see.
Yeah, cooler, right.
Cool, yeah, yes. About the integration itself, what is required to implement SCVMM, besides all the licensing stuff, of course? You need a SQL database, which can be on 2008 R2 or 2012. Beside that, you have integrations with other products like Netscaler, like F5 load balancers. You can manage out of SCVMM. Directly create virtual servers for load balancing out of SCVMM. Sorry. Hypervisors, they are supported from 2008 R2. Speaking of SCVMM SP1. To ESX, there was a recent update for VMM which supports ESX 5.0 update 1. Correct me if I'm wrong, Aiden. A sensor is a little bit more difficult because you have to install a binary on the sensor, but it also gets support from Citrix as well as from Microsoft. The gateway thing above is really new. So how to connect different data centers, different SCVMM or private clouds together, you need a gateway. And that is a product or a product classification which has been recently added to the portfolio or to the ecosystem of SCVMM. It's relatively new, and I have to admit that I don't really know anything about it in detail or in practice, but it's there.
Yeah, well, this all the gateway stuff is all for the network virtualization stuff. It came with Windows Server 2012. So Microsoft did not deliver their own network virtualization gateway. So we can create perfect isolated networks, but we can't really connect to other stuff. So there are some vendors who deploy or sell appliances which are basically gateways for the virtualized network. And with that, if you do network virtualization, but we don't have really time to talk about that, SCVMM does control your whole network virtualization infrastructure. So all the Hyper-V hosts are updated with information about network virtualization from SCVMM, and that makes Virtual Machine Manager one of the critical points in the environment. So if SCVMM is down, network virtualization still works, but the policies do not get updated, but that's more about network virtualization. So you will talk a little bit about more how can you make the centralized component really high available, right?
Yes, as Thomas already mentioned, SCVMM plays a central role for all the operation and configuration disciplines.
Yep.
Disciplines. So you have to be aware that if SCVMM is not available, everything continues to work. But if you're out of management, you're out of sight, you're out of control, that's not a good idea. There are different ways how to get from the left side, where you have a single point of failure. Everything is waiting till this stuff is working again. You can get to the other picture where you have a active-passive solution. So SCVMM is always an active-passive solution, not dependent how you or which method you choose to make it highly available. So there's no load balancing for SCVMM. You can do a virtualized SCVMM installation, of course, encapsulated in a single VM, SQL locally installed, replicated using Hyper-V Replica. It's a cheap, highly available solution. It's of course not agnostic to application failures, but if the host fails running SCVMM virtual machine, you have a failover scenario using a built-in replica feature. The other way is a failover cluster, traditional active-passive, 2 instances of SCVMM running on a failover cluster. To have the database highly available, classic traditional clustering, of course, and the additional possibility with 2012 SQL Server, which, from my opinion, is the best feature they introduced in SQL Server for a long time, always on. Database availability groups, those who know about Exchange 2010 and above, database availability groups in Exchange are similar to the SQL availability groups. They use the same underlying technology, and it's really easy to set up. Talking about the solution, clustering, we see it here, active-passive, as I said already. The machines can be physical or virtual, so it's also supported to have a guest clustering below the application, so below SCVMM. Or, as I mentioned, the simple solution, just virtualize SCVMM on top of Hyper-V, of course, because you get the free replica feature. A real-world example, this scenario we have for a big customer, which is virtualizing vCenter in that manner. So vCenter instance is a virtual machine running on Hyper-V 2012, replicated to another data center.
Okay, this was how you can install and make it high available and what you have to look for. Now let's get more into the features stuff. Let's talk about software-defined networks. Basically this shows software-defined networks, but normally you don't have the cables, right? By the way, there was some discussion about software-defined data centers and stuff, and there was like VMware is now really using that in marketing. Aidan Finn already talked about that this already available, and it's already available, I mean, since last year. I mean, when we talk about data centers, we really talk about compute, storage, and networking. And if we see on compute, this is of course the hypervisor, which would in our case would be Hyper-V. If we talk about network, it's network virtualization. And if you do talk about software-defined storage, this would be storage spaces in Windows Server 2012. Great. Now let's see what we got in SCVMM 2012 networking. SCVMM was limited in kind of they worked with the network and managed the network. For those who know VMM, you know already these terms, but for those who don't, we created logical networks. Logical networks are basically nothing else than the physical layer, like the VLANs and stuff like that, based on network sites where we added the VLAN and the subnet and stuff like that. We also created IP pools which could be used from the VMs. That was like, I think in April 2012 release. And now we have some changes. We have logical networks, and we still use them. We need them to see what's there on the physical side. But now we have VM networks. Virtual machines were connected to logical networks. Now they're connected to VM networks. Basically, there's another layer between them. We have port profiles, which can be on the host side, on the physical side, which define the teaming mode, for example, stuff like that. Or we can have them on the virtual side with bandwidth management and stuff like that. But I'll show you more to that later. And then there's a new concept of the logical switch. The logical switch, if you come from the VMware side, distributed switch would be something familiar, right?
Yes, not capable of all the functionalities you get with SCVMM, of course.
Okay. Great. Now have a quick look at that. That was SCVMM in 2012. We connected a logical network was, let's say, VLAN 25 and this subnet, and we connected that to a virtual machine. Now if you have a look at networking in SP1, we have this second layer, which is called a VM network. And the reason for that is we can now, with network virtualization, we can run different VM networks on a physical layer. So we can have different customers or isolated networks running on the same VLAN. And that's the reason why we have to do that in SCVMM as well. And there is the logical switch, which basically allows me to configure a Hyper-V virtual switch from a centralized management console, VMM, where I can say which switch extension are used, or which of the advanced functionality in Windows Server 2012 Hyper-V is used. For example, DSGP guard, SRIOV, and something. I configured that once in one place and push it out to all the Hyper-V servers in my environment. Okay. I will show that later in the demo, but now get to quick out thing about bare metal deployment of Hyper-V hosts. The great thing about Hyper-V is there's still Windows behind it, so you can use all the mechanisms you have already to deploy Windows or Windows Server. So you could use a DVD, a USB stick, you can use Windows deployment services, you can use config manager or whatever you have for your software deployment, or you could use virtual machine manager. And how this works is basically you boot up a physical machine. This gets disconnected to a Windows deployment service, gets a Windows PE image. The PE image copies a VHD file from the SCVM library, configures that, and boots the Hyper-V server from this VHD. Basically, it's boot from VHD, which you can do also on your Windows 7 or Windows 8 laptops. There are some enhancements we had in Virtual Machine Manager 2012 SP1. There is Deep Discovery. Deep Discovery does nothing else than I can boot the Hyper-V server. It uses a Windows PE image. It gets all the information from the Hyper-V server. How many network cards are there, which MAC addresses are used, how many disks are inside that. And I get all the information before I even deployed the Hyper-V host inside Virtual Machine Manager. That's something we have here. It also makes use of consistent device naming, which is a cool new feature that came with Windows Server 2012. Actually, it's a hardware feature. Vendors have to implement that. You can see the names of the network cards, the network adapter, of the network ports in the OS with the same name. That's a huge advantage now we have.
Yeah, compared to whatever hypervisor you're setting up, you have 10 boxes you're installing in the data center, and none of the 10 has the NIC1 mapped to Ethernet 1 or whatever in the same physical layer or position. So we have 10 hosts with 5 NICs with 1 gig. NIC 0 might not be NIC 0 on server 2, and that really sucks if you have to install a lot of servers. You always have to have a guy in the data center, plugs out NIC 1, yes it is NIC 1, plugs in again, yes we are correct. And consistent device naming solves that pain by telling you which physical NIC really is plugged in where. Yeah.
No, exactly. Basically, your hardware has to support that. So the other thing is logical switches. We can now deploy. I talked about logical switches a little bit. Now we can, when we deploy a Hyper-V host, we can already set the information of the logical switch to the Hyper-V host, which is great. And there's also some new concept, converged fabric. I think I talked last E2E, last pub forum, about that in the MEP masterclass. What is converged network? Basically, we want to use a network for different types of traffic. That would be something. If we have to show you this, that's a traditional design of a Hyper-V host. Normally we use management, we have a cluster network, we have a dedicated live migration network, and we have a dedicated network for all the Hyper-V virtual machines. That's how we deployed it in the past with 2008 R2, or we still can deploy that with 2012. But with the new solution, we can do a bandwidth management and stuff like that. We have the chance to, for example, team 2 network adapters together. On this team, we create a virtual switch, and on this virtual switch, we create virtual network adapters not only for the virtual machines but also for the Hyper-V host, and set their QoS policy. Now let's switch to the demo. I still hope I have still connection, right?
Does not look like.
Something like this. Oh, wait. It's coming. Okay, great. For those who have never seen that, that's the console of Virtual Machine Manager. As I said, we are managing here not only virtual machines, we are managing virtual machines and services. We also have a fabric part where all the physical stuff gets in there. We have a library with all the information for all the templates and all that kind of stuff. And some other settings and job views and stuff like that. Okay, but what I want to talk about is first, here are logical networks. I have a list of logical networks, and what I'm going to do is have a tenant network where is this basically is a VLAN, something which I offer to where I want to run all the networks of my customer. And they're always saying that network virtualization is really complicated, but in this case it's really easy. I'm going to create just a new VM network with network virtualization. Basically what I do is give it a name, choose my physical network where this virtual network is running on. If I want to use network virtualization or not, in this case I want to use it, and I can add some subnets for this virtual network and stuff like that. So don't do that.
This feature came up because you as a hoster, you don't want to give users, or you want to give your users, your cloud users, the possibility to decide which IP subnets they create for their virtual machines. So customer 1 can use the same subnet as customer 2. They don't interfere with each other, but they get connected via a logical layer onto the physical layer, not interfering with each other, even if they have VMs containing the same IP address configuration.
Yeah, and you can also make this available for your customers. I mean, now me as an admin configuring virtual networks, that's fine, that's okay. But it makes more sense to even give customer A access to a UI where he can create his own virtual networks, and I can make that available. And I also can, but I don't have any gateways and stuff like that in my VMM at the moment. I also can add some gateways and VPN connections so customer could connect to this network they just created. If you're familiar to Windows Azure, if you have used Windows Azure Infrastructure as a Service, this looks familiar. You have there a network tab where you can create your network stuff. It does not look, the UI does look completely different, but the terms are basically the same.
If you did not use it yet, there's a 3 days free trial. Log in with your Microsoft ID and you get 30 days free trial for Azure services. It's really cool. It's really cool stuff. They have a very easy to use portal to create all the cloud services, not only virtual machines, SQL databases, web applications, storage pools, whatever.
Okay. This is just quick about networking. There's much more in there, but we don't have time to cover that. If you want to do host deployment, we have to create first a profile for our Hyper-V host. This is called a host profile, and it's basically the design of our Hyper-V host. If you're going to have a look at that, I have one type of Hyper-V host at the moment in my network, so I only have one profile. I added here the virtual disk, which I use, which is copied to the Hyper-V host and booted up. Network is a little bit slow, but it works. I also have here the network configuration stuff I can do. I can configure all the NICs. If I say, yeah, my host have 6 NICs, I have 12 NICs, whatever, I would do the configuration here. I also can do, you see I have a lot of NICs there. I do also do some partitions and stuff like that. I can all create that inside. And of course, I have to customize the operating system, and I can use the existing deployment method. If you know about the unattended XML file for Windows deployment, basically that's the same thing. I've created a custom unattended file with some settings and stuff like that. You can use that. Okay. If I want to do some bare metal deployment, I go to Fabric and I want to add another host. The only thing I have to do first is configure the remote management, HP ILO or whatever you're using. And go for not logical networks. Go to add, as you can see there you can already add other hypervisors. Let's go and we go for the best one. We had a physical computer to that. I can add a run as account with rights on this remote management. Oh, I've created that one. That's not so interesting, but... And now there's the interesting part. I configured the remote management for some of my servers. I have to take the right ones, otherwise they will get shut down.
This just does a port scan on your network on the IPMI port.
Yep. As you see there, this deep discovery is already a warning. If I do deep discovery, the server gets booted up with a Windows P image. If it's already running, it gets shut down and booted up again. So don't take the wrong server. Here you can see the server side it's found. If you have a big network, you can find more. Normally you see also manufacturer, but my vendor didn't get that quite right. What I can do is now select the host I want to install. I do not skip now. This will shut down this host. Say where in which host group I want to deploy. Select the available hardware host profile. Sorry about that. With all the configuration. And now what's happening, or should happen, is to reboot this server. I can enter names for this host, Hyper-V 005. And I can also configure, after the deep dive is the deep discovery is finished, I will see the MAC addresses popping up here. And I can configure all the special stuff. I already have done that in my profile by IP addresses or something. If I don't configure anything, it will take IP addresses from some pools and stuff. That's what I would do. Okay. So that's the thing about networking and bare metal deployment. Let's go now to the other cool thing, which I hope a lot of people will use in the future, because that will be the important part. We're talking about services. If you run a service or create a VM, it's mostly a service. I mean, if you create a web shop or something, this couldn't be a 3-layer application. It could be web servers, it could be application servers, and it could be a backend, a SQL server, right? And normally, if you go there and just create VMs and you have no connections to these VMs and stuff, it's kind of a mess and to manage. With services, you can do that. I have here a little simple web shop service template. Oh, sorry. And you will see where this is going. Oh. Sorry, I want to open the designer. That's what I want to do. Okay. That's my service template. Now it gets a little bit more interesting. I define here different tiers. I have here a 3-tier application. One tier is the SQL tier, where I configure how many virtual machines are in there, how is the SQL configuration and stuff like that. Then I have application tier, and I have a web tier. And normally the web tier is something you maybe want to scale out and stuff like that. And I configure all that in here. But we will show more. We don't have time to get deep inside that, but let's see here. If I go to the web tier, I can see I can make default instance counts that would deploy 2 IIS web servers. And if I can scale that to 6 or something, whatever I want.
That's also the place where you add your load balancer. You just install the configuration provider for Netscaler, for example, on the SCVMM server, and you add the load balancer and the virtual IP profile here. So that's the place where you can scale out your IT service.
Okay.
It's also a very cool checkbox there, create an availability set for the tier.
Yeah.
Love that checkbox.
Yeah, that's great, because if you're running a cluster and you have multiple virtual machines, multiple IIS servers, you don't want them to run all on the same physical box, because when this box crashes, yeah, you lose all the connectivity. So this makes sure that your IIS web servers or SQL cluster or whatever it is runs on different physical machines. This can be to cluster availabilities.
It's like a anti-infinity rule on vSphere, but it's automatically managed.
I already showed some stuff here, and I want to go to services. Now, if you go here, I just see a VM view. Okay, that's the normal view you get. I see all the virtual machines running in my environment. Right. If I go to service view, I see all the services. If it's working, no, which I have deployed. Okay. I've at the moment 2 services deployed. I can do more, whatever I want. But if I look at, for example, for our beer shop, which I deployed some days ago, I have a 3-layer application, like I said, with running 1 SQL server. It doesn't really make sense. Should be maybe 2 or something, and clustered that. Then I have a server where the application is running, and I have 2 web servers. Now, the cool thing about that is I normally do this example with some web shop when the Surface is released and we need more web servers. But think about yesterday with if this would be a bar. The app server and the SQL server would be the beer, and the IIS web servers would be the bartenders. Now, normally I need 2 bartenders to serve all the customers, but now it's pub form and there's free beer for an hour. I want to scale out that. So I can make sure I can do a scale out and can add other bartenders, or in this case web servers. Could give a name or auto-generate that. Say next. And this would deploy me just a next IIS web server with the same configurations the other have. Would automatically place it behind the load balancer and have a 3rd server in my environment.
Could you ask for more than one?
I don't think you can do more than one, but I think not in the GUI.
View script.
You just,
paste your script.
yeah, you just script it in PowerPoint.
If you look at this, you could script that for even doing more. There is also some other cool stuff we have seen. We have seen people doing orchestrator and operations manager, which is the monitoring tool from System Center, watching the load on the web servers. And if the load is constantly high, orchestrator is going to deploy automatically another, doing a scale out in Virtual Machine Manager. There you can
Imagine what happens on a distributed denial of service attack in that moment.
Yeah.
But
can I have the view of the operation manager on the SCVMM? For example, if the servers on the SCVMM, or does I need to have the two consoles?
You have some connections, but if you want to go, you have the operations manager is the kind of console you want to go. You have to. Yeah. You have dashboards and stuff like that. You have some performance counters and stuff in there, but if you want to do real stuff, you could. Yeah, exactly. Some other cool thing is versioning of this service. If you're going to have a look again in the library, I created another service, which is basically a FileZilla web, FTP server. I had created one service with version 39. And then a new version of FileZilla came up. Now, what I did was I used a technology called Server App V, which is basically kind of App V. Oh no, not again. Clicking on the right stuff. This is a one-tier application, so it's basically very simple. It's just a VM, right? And it's running this virtual application here. Properties. It's basically just an app-v package, which I created, which I added here a version, and said, yeah, that's my service, and this is the version 39 of my service. So I also upgraded that and created a version with another package, with a new package for 41. Now, the great thing is if you deploy a VM from a normal VM template, the VM doesn't know from which template they came. With a service template, they still know which template was behind that. So if there is a new version, I can change that.
they know their roots, so if you upgrade them, they pick up the right template.
Okay, let's have a look at this VM. Hope connection still is fine. It's kind of slow. Okay, here I'm running my FTP server, which I deployed with version 39. You can see that here. And now I think, yeah, no, 41 is ready. So I'm going to update. You see also here the template version. I'm going to update this service. Set template. Say template browse. Check the new version, new release. This can also be not just one application. There can be multiple applications. There could also be a change in the VHD in the basic OS. I go next. Okay, no settings to have. Special application could have additional settings where I have to enter names and stuff of database servers and stuff. And then I can say here, apply the update to the existing virtual machines, or even replace the whole virtual machine. So, but I want to apply it to the existing virtual machine. That's a lot faster. And I will get a warning, because this is just a one-tier application with just one web server, and it says me, yeah, if you do that update now, it won't be available for some time. So, but I don't care at the moment.
So if it's multi-tier and scaled out, for example, you can define how the upgrade process should go on. So maybe first update one of the IAS service and update one of the SQL service, and then do the other stuff. So your service will not be down for your users.
For example, if you have multiple web servers and you want to upgrade them, you can, if you have 8 web servers behind a load balance, you can say upgrade 2 at the time. If they're finished, upgrade the next 2 and stuff like that. Exactly. You go next and finish. And in this case, now it's connected to my server. And if I'm fast enough to open that, come on. You see, it closed the window, and let's see if the upgrade is still running or already finished. It's already finished. Now I open the application, Yeah, connection is not that good.
In this particular
Okay.
case, it just updated the AppV package.
Yeah. Go and I see version 41. So I can update. I mean, for one server that's okay, but you have to imagine if you have like 100 servers, you're a service provider or something, and you have 100 of the same servers, and you want to upgrade one application to all 100 servers, you can do that like this. And then you think, oh, application 41 doesn't work. What you now can do is, as you can do with AppV, you can set the template, and of course you can check an older version of the template. And do the same thing again and go back to the other version.
So mainly this is available for web applications actually, but server AppV is going far beyond this this web stuff. It's just not it's not yet there. But the concept of server AppV is clearly that you want to decouple the server application from the operating system. Like you decouple AppV packages on your clients since years from your operating system. Same concept.
Okay, let's go back to the screen and do some quickly overview about service templates. Okay, this is services. Yeah, we have seen that. Why should you use that? Okay, you can do scale out stuff, you see the application, you can use server AppV, all that kind of stuff. We decouple the application from the OS and things like that. And the other thing is important, the service template is linked to the server, or the server is linked back to the service template, which is not done for normal templates, right? Okay, there are some new features. The problem was the VMM server had to connect to inside the virtual machine. So if you deployed that to an untrusted domain, you didn't have the rights. If the network was disconnected to that system, it didn't work. Now there is a solution for that, and what they do is basically if VMM does not have a connection to the virtual machine, it will create an ISO file and attach that ISO file. There's also Linux guest support and SQL Server 2012 support as well. There's also some kind of solution accelerator which Microsoft announced some really, I think it even was last year. Yeah. And they are creating service templates for your environment already configured for example, domain controllers and stuff like that. So, sorry about that. Okay. Your turn.
Well, we have seen Hyper-V and service and templates and whatever, but there's also a self-service feature which has been decoupled from SCVMM. Recently it was a part of the SCVMM installation. Now it's a complete separate product connecting to SCVMM. Imagine you have Azure subscription. You can create your workloads from a single portal on Azure or on premise. I'm going to show you that in a minute.
That's my mouse.
I have the same.
Somebody stole the mouse.
So what you can see here is basically the self-service portal for SCVMM. It's called App Controller.
Not yet.
Not yet?
Oh, you have to close, you have to escape it or something. No, yeah.
Much more better. Yeah. So as you really see it now, it's the self-service portal for SCVMM. It's called App Controller. And I'm not going very deeply inside, but what you can see is that I have virtual machines running here. Which are basically running in a cloud. The cloud can be configured within SCVMM. It's just a group of resources I define myself, which can be templates I can use in a cloud, which can be virtual machines I can use in the cloud, can be also services. So if I group only private cloud services, it's not very interesting. What I want to show you is what happens if I have a mixed environment with workloads running on Windows Azure, workloads running on premise. What you see here is a virtual machine. It's currently stopped, just to save money, but I can turn it on. Azure is not for free, to be honest. It costs money, but it might be an opportunity to scale out your service for a certain amount of time, for example. You want to have a huge lab environment built in hours, go to Azure, run it for a month, shut it down again. That's very easy. Your users can deploy virtual machines as well as services showed from Thomas from this portal here. Maybe I switch the user which has not that much permissions. This is a self-service user. I'm running it in the browser. So I can decide to deploy in a new virtual machine, which is not rocket science. But I can see how I am limited in my private cloud on-premise here. Yes?
No, 5 minutes.
Ah, 5 minutes. Okay. I'm just choosing which cloud I want to manage. I choose the templates which are available to me actually. This is configurable by the administrator. I choose the standard server 2012 template. It shows me how much CPU and memory and disk I have left. If I have lots more virtual networks, I can choose the network running where my virtual machine should run. I choose the name for the virtual machine, E2E test. Just basic settings for the moment, and I choose deploy. So that's the self-service portal, which comes with SCVMM. It's an easy, more or less one-click install, and you get that what you see here.
You say that you get the templates that you have the rights to use?
Oh well, I just created some templates.
Yeah, but I mean, you only get the templates that you have the right to use,
yes.
right?
And basically, if I create machines in the private cloud here, they are available to my self-service role. So if he's assigned to the same self-service role, if I configure that, he only sees his virtual machines while I only see mine. And we can share that if the administrator allows that. So let's go back to the slides. We are running out of time, unfortunately. Before SP1, it was a little bit difficult with Active Directory. Active Directory now is not a boundary anymore, so you can add hosts and clusters from a non-trusted domain, as well as you can add single Hyper-V hosts in a perimeter or a DMZ network. There are things to be aware. We can talk about that afterwards, but if you want to add Hyper-V hosts, SCVMM tries to push the VMM agent onto the host, which is CIFS or SMB connection. So be aware of that. There are other possibilities to install the agent manually and connect the host to the SCVMM. But basically, your forest or your firewall is not the boundary anymore, which limits you to have a single SCVMM instance. It's not all available in the GUI. PowerShell is your friend. So you cannot do all the stuff in the GUI. You know that from Zen Desktop very well. It's the same in SCVMM. What if we want to manage vSphere? There is an API. We have to create a runners account which has the right permissions on vSphere. SCVMM connects to vCenter, and then from there we can add hosts. It does not support NFS storage, to be honest. It's not manageable within SCVMM. I'll not go to the feature list here. You can watch that afterwards. But basically, what you see here, virtual machine operations configuring is not too bad. It's really okay. On the host side, it's limited. The same applies for Zen server. You have to install the binary, the extension for SCVMM on Zen server within the DOM 0. And it applies also to Zen server. Virtual machine operations, basic management is done very well out of SCVMM. On the host side, you better use Zen Center to configure your clusters and hosts, or Zen server pools, let's say it like that. I'm just going to show you a second that I'm not cheating. So what I have here is my own SCVMM environment, which consists of several Hyper-V hosts, as well as ESX hosts and an ESX cluster here. I can vMotion virtual machines on ESX. I can send motion virtual machines between Zen servers. I can power up them. I can basically configure them, add new disks, for example.
And you can also migrate them to Hyper-V, right?
Yes, I can migrate them to Hyper-V. I can store it in the SCVMM library and deploy it again from there. It's like if you want to manage virtual machines from SCVMM, I would say it's cool. If you want to manage hosts, then you better stay on the original product. Like managing ESX clusters out of SCVMM is not that cool. It's very limited, but if you think about having a self-service portal for your application managers or your virtual machine managers, which should operate different hypervisors or virtual machines on different hypervisors, the self-service portal or SCVMM console could be a good partner for that. As I said, it depends. I'm not going to tell you that SCVMM replaces Zen Center and vSphere Client, not at all. But it's a cool addition for managed virtual workloads. I have a particular use case, a big customer which has all three types of hypervisors. And there is a department which is in charge to manage virtual machines and IT services. And IT services there consists of virtual machines running on all of those three types of hypervisors. Now they have the self-service portal with a predefined cloud for their own service. So they see exactly their service which they have to manage, and they can turn on, turn off, shut down, power on virtual machines, connect to the virtual console of the VM from a single web-based portal. That's really cool for them. Maybe let's do a recap before the end of the session.
Okay, basically VMM, the total management infrastructure for your private cloud is Fabric, VMs and services. So everything in one place, everything you can do, and we can manage stuff like that. Important, it's not virtual machine management, it's also Fabric management.
We didn't show you all the storage stuff. This is cool, by the way, but there's not enough time to show you. It's really cool what you can do with storage management out of SCVMM if your storage box supports SMIS, for example.
Okay, next point. The full power of System Center comes if you put all the products together. It's not if you're using one product, that's fine, the product is good, but the full power of System Center is if you use and connect each product together. For the example I made with SCOM, which monitors, and Orchestrator, which automatically deploys new virtual machines and stuff like that, that's not something which is totally new or something. That's things people with System Center already have deployed.
Yes, I think there are also troubles you can run into with SCVM. Of course, it's an application. There are some cool articles on TechNet how to troubleshoot SCVMM, debug logging, etc., etc., etc. I just pasted the links in here. Some other resources where you find documentation about SCVMM, how to get started if you know nothing about SCVMM. You find all the documentations in on TechNet. Yes, unfortunately running out of time. If you have more questions, if you want to see more about the live demos or want to see more about third-party hypervisors, talk to us, we can show you offline. Okay.
Thanks. Sorry.